Hey guys, this is Brendon from Tap Rack Bang. Today we're going to talk about rifle zeros. What optic are you going to use? What height is your optic? What are the distances specifically designed for those optics or more advantageous for those specific optics? The one thing that we see a lot of our clients do is they go to an indoor range, they put the target as far back as they could, more than likely 25 yards. They zero their red dot, call it a day. Now, is that red dot zeroed? Yes, in the technical term, but is it zeroed to its most advantageous ballistic drop? Probably not, right? 25 yards, if you guys didn't know, is designed or was designed specifically for iron sights, right? So you would have the bullet and then your front sight post meet at about 25 yards, and then the bullet would continue rising over your front sight post. Now, Brendon, is this a bad thing? Most red dots we do holdovers. Well, it's not a bad thing because with an iron sight, you have the post coming up. So if you attempt to do a holdover, you're technically covering up your target. So what they did is they made sure that the bullet would be over the front sight. And so you would learn how to shoot iron sights that way, right? So if you're shooting something at 50 yards with your 25 yard zeroed iron sight, it would hit a few inches above where your iron sight's gonna be. If you're shooting at 100 yards, then the bullet's gonna be a couple inches above. So you might be aiming at the stomach area, right? So if you try to hit the chest at 100 yards with iron sights, you're aiming at the stomach area because the bullet's high. It's designed like that because for the specific reason that it's hard for you to do holdovers with iron sight. Imagine doing a 6 to 12 inch holdover with your iron sight at 150 yards, you'll be covering up the target. So hence, iron sights are designed to be hold under, and that's why they're 0 to 25 yards, so the bullet is above your front sight post. Obviously, we don't live in the 60s and we have red dots in our firearms, right? This one specifically right here is an AEMS from Holosun. This one is at a lower 1/3, right? So it's not co-witness, by the way. So co-witness heights are designed to co-witness with your iron sights. So if you have iron sights right here and you look through your iron sights, your red dot would be at the same plane, at the same height with your red dot. This one is lower 1/3. What that means is that the iron sights, if Royce had an iron sight on this one, would be in the lower 1/3 portion of your viewing window right here. Specifically designed so that you can have a higher optic, not be disturbed, or your side picture not be covered by your iron sight. Now, specifically, this lower 1/3 position was popularized by EOTech, right? The EOTech optics passed the original EOTech 522s or 512s, where they take AA batteries. The EXPS series of EOTechs were at the lower 1/3 height. And that's what most special operations guys ran. They ran optics that are EOTechs that are lower 1/3, right? With that in mind, they developed the 50 yard zero for those optics, right? So what would happen is that you would zero the red dot at 50 yards, the bullet and the dot would meet up at 50 yards, and then the bullet would slightly go above your red dot, right, by a couple inches, and then it would start to come back down at 200 yards. And so what you would have is essentially a gun zeroed for 50 yards and a gun zeroed at 200 or 220 yards. The beauty of this zero, though, is that the deviation is very minimal, okay? So you would have, obviously from bore, about 3 inches deviation on the muzzle, and then it would reduce back to 0, and then you would have about 2.5 to 2.4 deviation between 50 yards to 100 to 150 yards until it starts dipping down close to 200 to 220 yards. So what would end up happening is if you're shooting at something or somebody or whatever past 50 yards, it's point of aim, point of impact, right? You're either 2.4 inches above or 2.4 inches down. Regardless, you're gonna hit the target really easily, okay? Also, these guys are designed with a reticle system on it that has notches, right? So you have your dot in the middle, and then you got your wider ring on the outside. On the bottom ring, it's called their CQB reticle. You would have a notch where you could aim for closer distances, right? Creating or alleviating the need for you to mentally think of what your holdover would be. So, like I said, These guys work a lot. They were extremely great. They work a lot for a lot of special operators out there, law enforcement, and then civilians as well when it comes to home defense. On top of that, once people started standardizing body armor in the military, law enforcement, and civilians buying body armor, what they started noticing is that the absolute co-witness optic is hard to aim when you have body armor on, or a helmet, or if you have like ear pro or headsets on. So the higher optic definitely gave them a slight advantage. As the GWAT kept going, more people are starting to notice that the lower 1/3 was not high enough, okay? So what ended up happening is, one, they developed 1.93, right? I personally had a 1.93 for a little while, right? Scalar Works has really good optic mounts for those guys. The problem though for the longest is they don't have backup iron sights that you can use, because inconveniently the 1.93 optic, the base of the optic is sitting where the iron sights would be at, right? But 1.93 is good. And then people start complaining, hey, we can't see our optics, our backup iron sights. So what they did is they raised it up one more time. So now you have unity mounts at 2.25s, clearing the way for iron sights in the bottom, and you got your optics at the top, right? Now this obviously offers a lot of advantages, okay? Let's take a look at the optic right here, right? Steiner MPS mounted on top of this LPVO. This would be close to the height of a unity, maybe even slightly higher. A couple of benefits that you get, right? And mainly the benefits that most people do. This is my night fighting gun, has lasers on it and whatnot, but having the optic a little high, right, or a lot higher, allows you to passively aim with your NVGs, right? So you're able to pretty much have your NVGs up and look through the dot with your NVGs unimpeded, right? As compared to other optics like the lower 1/3. Is it possible? Absolutely. Is it a little hard with the lower 1/3? Yes, it is. Okay. Now, on top of this though, this also offers a couple more benefits, right? One, you have an upright shooting position, right? So your neck's up, you're more relaxed when you're shooting, benefiting you more when it comes to CQB or shooting on the move. And two, if you're an operator out there that somehow is encountering a lot of gas or whatnot, wearing a gas mask and shooting a high optic is really comfortable, right? I personally found, especially when we were in the Marine Corps, I'm unable to aim through my ACOG with my gas mask, right? And so the Marine Corps' answer to that was obviously issue us RMRs on top of our ACOGs, and then now they do that on top of their LPVOs. They offer RMRs or a secondary sighting optic that's higher, so that they can wear it with gas masks, right? And then because the optic's higher, the rifle buttstock sits a little lower in your body, and therefore giving you more recoil control, right? Obviously fundamentals still important. What's the problem with these guys? Well, let's talk about a couple of things, okay? The inherent problem with a higher optic is that now you're encountering bigger height of bore issues, right? So what you do is you zero it for a further distance than what you would normally zero most optics, and here's why. So let's say we zero this at 25 yards, right? So you're pretty much angling the optic at 25 yards, right, in relation to your barrel. And what would end up happening is the deviation is so much, right, that at CQB distances, you're having to decide, right? Am I at 3 inches? Am I at 2.5, 1 inch? Where am I? What distance this is, right? Because if you haven't noticed, as you go do training, when you're at CQB distances, you have 3 things that you need to take account about. Number 1, how far is the dude, right? Which is usually hard. 2, perceived distance and perceived height, right? What is 2 inches at 7 yards? What does that look like? I don't know. Do you? Probably with training, we probably do. And then lastly, what is the actual holdover, right? So there's 3 things, right? At what distance is this person I'm shooting at? What holdover are my optics at that distance? And what is, let's say, a 1.8 inch holdover look at that person at that specific distance, right? When you think about it, it's really difficult, right? So what would end up happening is operators would take less low percentage shots and would rely on other people to do that with lower optics, right? To solve for that problem, what they did is they zeroed these higher optics at 100 yards. Brendon, I don't engage targets beyond 25 yards. I get it, 1 second. If you zero the optic at 100 yards, what you're gonna have is that from 0 to 25, you're gonna have less deviation, right? Let's say you zero this optic at 100 yards, you're gonna have less deviation at your holdovers, right? So I got my ballistic app here. This rifle, 0 to 100 yards, from 0 to 25 yards, you're going from 3.4 inches at the muzzle to about 2.5 inches, right? Is that bad? It's not, because all you have to do is split the difference. Hey, anything between 0 to 25, 3 inches up. That's all you have to do, right? And so when you look at something, you just memorize what 3 inches looks like on a person's face or a person's chest. And when you encounter something within CQB distances, you just aim for that specific area, because you know that your holdover is going to be constantly 3 inches, because that's you splitting the difference between 0 to 25. Now, past 25 to 50, your zero is going to be between 2.5 inches to 1.5. So all you have to do is, hey, if it's past 25, it's 2 inches, right? And more than likely, the error in our shooting is probably bigger than the actual holdover itself. Past 50 yards, point of aim, point of impact, because the deviation is 1.2 to 0.1 inch. So that's why a lot of these high-rise optics, unity mounts, castle mounts, right, even 193 mounts, and these guys right here are 0 to 100 yards, because they try to eliminate the deviation that you have to follow. It's either 3 inches at 25, 2 inches between 25 to 50, or point of aim, point of impact between 50 to 100. Anything after that is obviously still ballistically calculated, but that is why higher optics are zeroed at 100 yards. So if you haven't noticed, we just tackled a couple of the zeros that are popular out there, right? You got your 25-yard zero, specifically designed for iron sights. You got your 50-yard zero, designed for, you know, absolute co-witness or lower 1/3. And then you got your high-rise optics at 193, so 2.25s, designed, or hopefully you're using 100-yard zeros on those. If not, by the way, you can do whatever zero you want. Just know that if you don't optimize your optic height for the zero that you currently have, or vice versa, you don't optimize your zero for the optic height that you have, you're either going to be having a hard time doing a lot of holdover calculations, or it's not going to be a fun day for you. So let's go ahead and zero these red dots, right? So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to zero the Holosun AEMS. With its lower 1/3, we're going to go with the optimized zero at 50 yards. We're at a 50-yard bay. Let's do it, okay? Now, a couple people are going to be complaining, Brendon, I only have a 25-yard bay at my hometown, whatnot. Believe it or not, at the end of this video, we're going to talk about how to calculate that, right? There is a way to get a rough zero for 100 yards at 25 or at 50, though you still need to confirm. There is a way to do it, okay? But for now, let's zero the optic for 50 yards. All right, let's go ahead and zero this optic. So we position ourselves at the 50-yard line. It is my suggestion, right, that you obviously stabilize yourself as much as you can. So I have a case right here, and on top, I have a really good savior bag right here that we're gonna use as our base, okay? Are there more stable spots? Absolutely, but this is what we got right now, okay? The second thing that you wanna do, right, is get a small mag, right? If you can, it gets you lower, right, to the table, makes it easier for you to shoot. If you have 10 rounders like these, it's totally fine. It is what it is, but I like to use a small 10-round mag or a 20-round mag when I'm zeroing the gun, makes it lower, okay? And then lastly, what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna lower the dot, right? I'm gonna lower the dot to where it's barely visible, because that allows me to see the dot at its smallest version, right? Because if I pumped it up higher, the bloom is gonna make the dot a little bit bigger, making me less accurate. So it's at its barely visible state right now. I'm stable right here. The way we're gonna do this is we're gonna shoot 3 rounds, put the gun on safe, go down range, mark those up, call our windage, and then elevation call, shoot another 3 rounds, and then we'll see if we're zeroed, okay? The one thing you do not wanna do is you don't wanna shoot 1 round, adjust, and then shoot another round, because there is the human factor, right? At the very least, if I shoot 3 rounds, it may mess up 1, but hopefully 2 of those are good to go, okay? So let's go shoot 3 rounds from this Geisley BCM rifle. All right, cool. Let's go downrange and check it out. All right, so we're now here back at the 50-yard line, right? So our targets are a little low. So if you come a little closer, actually, what you're gonna notice, if these guys have their inch markers, right? So I can see, because these squares right here are inches, right? I can see that I'm like 1, 2, 3, 4. So I'm 4 inches to the left. And then I'm like 1, 2, 3, about 3 inches down, right? So I need to, when you're adjusting these optics, what you want to think about is where do I want to move my bullet, okay? So, not the dot, the bullet, okay? So I want to move my bullet a few inches to the right, and I want to move my bullet a few inches going up. So let's go ahead and take a look. What are the Hollison adjustments? And we'll see where we can go from there. All right, so our point of impact was a little bit off. We were 4 inches to the left, and then 3 inches down, right? So let's adjust our optic. When it comes to adjusting your optic, you need to take into account what is it that you're actually doing, right? Am I moving the dot towards where the point of impact is at, or am I moving the bullet? It gets confusing because people get confused, right? It is 2024, but what you should do is you should move the bullet to the center of where you're aiming at. That will make it easier for you mentally. So we're 3 inches down, so I gotta move the bullet 3 inches up, and we're 4 inches to the left, so I gotta move the bullet 4 inches to the right. This Hollison optic, based on our research, is a half MOA adjustment, right? What that means is that every click is about a half an inch, right? Not exactly half an inch, but close to half an inch at 100 yards. Well, we are at 50 yards, so you divide that by 2. So what we get is per click, we get a 1/4 inch movement. So you gotta take account into that, because some optics are 1/4 inch movements at 100 yards, and some optics are half an inch, and the really cheap ones are about 1 inch at 100 yards, okay? So don't do that. So let's calculate this. I have to move 4 inches to the left, right, at a 1/4. So therefore I need to multiply by 4, 16 clicks to the right. So let's do that. Right here. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16. Okay. Then I need 3 inches up. So multiplied by 4, it's going to be 12 going up. So let's do that. Where's the up? There we go. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. So after you make your adjustment, hit that optic a couple of times like a pedophile and you'll be good to go, okay? So let's go shoot. Royce asked me, why am I hitting the optic like a pedophile, right? Well, because you need to settle the optic, okay? When we had RCOs, we would make the adjustment, we would rack the rifle a couple of times to settle in the adjustments, okay? Because what would end up happening if you don't, on some occasions, what would happen is the first round would jostle the gun and it would adjust that optic. And so the first round would be at a specific place, and then the second and the third round would be impacting towards that actual adjustments that you have. Now this may be true for some optic and it may not be true for some, but I do it anyway because you never know, right? And then sometimes too, when you are doing your clicks, what you could have done is you could have landed in between the detent, right? And so jostling it up, you could either go to the left or to the right side of that detent, locking the optic in. But always do that though. You can either hit it like a pedophile, or you can go ahead and rack the bolt a couple of times if you need to. All right, so we made our adjustment. We're gonna go ahead and take 3 shots. All right, let's go check it out. All right, so we're now here, right? So we were here earlier, right? We moved it 16 clicks to the right, or 4 inches to the right. 1, 2, 3, 4, right? But the point of impact was a little bit halfway here. So it is kind of I guess that does track, to be honest with you. And then you got 1, 2, 3, 3 inches up. Elevation wise, obviously that might have been me throwing the shot off, right? Or that could have been the pedophile round. But the other two are definitely elevation wise good. So what we're gonna do is we're gonna move it 1/2 inch to the left, right? And see if we can get the results that we want. So 1/2 inch would be approximately 2 clicks for our purposes here. We have a really fresh target, so it's not as bad, but coming close to the 0 point, right, what you want to do is you want to mark these targets up, right, so that you're able to, you know, track your shots, because if not, it's going to be really confusing. Thankfully today I have Royce taking a picture of this guy, and then when we come back later, we'll be able to confer the proper shots. All right, so let's go ahead and adjust the optic, right? We need to move the bullet 1/2 inch to the left, this being a 1/2 MOA at 100 yards, so therefore it's a 1/4 MOA or 1/4 inch at 50 yards. Let's go ahead and move it. So each click is going to be a 1/4 inch. We need 1/2 inch with 2 clicks. 1, 2. Let's go ahead and shoot it. All right, guys, so we finally got the rifle zeroed, right? One thing about zeroing is there's 3 parts to this process. One is getting on paper in general. So the way to do that is you can either bore sight it, right? You can bore sight at the range by propping up the upper with it removed from everything, looking down and making sure that the optic's at least on paper. A way to do it is what people use bore sighters, right? Like lasers. That will get you on paper. By the way, bore sighting devices does not zero the optic, it just gets you on paper, okay? Because we see a lot of students do that too. Once we got it on paper, which our first string of fire was here, the second phase is big movements, right? So we had big movements, we had to move this group all the way to near our aiming point, and which we did, right? We were successful at that. And then the hardest part of zeroing is the minute movements, right? Which is refining the zero as much as you can. Because there are a couple things in play, right? For me, I have astigmatism. On top of that, then this is where your skill kind of gets tested. So like I said, big movements up here, and then we had grouping up here, and then I'm throwing a couple of shots down. So we moved up, the first string of fire we had, the rounds were a little high. We moved it 4 down, and I think it was 2 left, right? 4 clicks down, 2 left, and boom, we are finally zeroed with this rifle. One more thing though, since this is Royce's rifle, he has to shoot it, okay? I get mechanical zero, but each person has little minute mannerisms that they do when they're shooting, right? No matter how good you are, there will be those minute deviations in the way you shoot. So even if I zero your rifle for you, you still have to confirm it as much as you can. Even if they mechanically zero the rifle for you, make sure you confirm it regardless of who zeroed it to ensure that that rifle is good to go for you. All right, so that's how you zero a rifle optic, okay? Now, Brendon, I only got a 25-yard range, but I was told that I need to zero at 100 yards or at 50 yards. Well, there is a way to do this. Granted, it's not a perfect way to do it, but it's a way to do it. You still need to confirm at 50 to 100 though. So let's say you go to one of the beautiful indoor ranges here in Southern California. Currently right now, we're at Micro Hoggies. Let's say you go to FT3 Tactical. They have a 25-yard lane. You go shoot your 25 yards. What you can do is you can use a ballistic calculator, right? There's a bunch of them online, right? Well, you use a ballistic calculator, figure out a couple of things, okay? This is really important. Figure out what the height is between your bore and to the center line of your optic, right? That's where your bore is at, for pretty much where your muzzle is at, and where the center line of your optic is, okay? What you can do is look up the ballistic coefficient of your round that you're shooting. Then, obviously, the weight of the round, right? Whether it's 55 grain, and then the caliber. Here's an important part, okay? Muzzle velocity. So if you look at the side of a box of a round, it's gonna give you an estimated muzzle velocity. Now that may not actually be true because in California, you got people running around with 10.5-inch rifles all the way to 20-inch rifles, and muzzle velocity do vary. A good ammunition manufacturer is gonna have that data for you, right? So for me, this 14.5-inch rifle, pin and welded, has a muzzle velocity of 2750, right? With a .556 round, that's 55 grain. with this, armed with this knowledge, right, I was able to calculate that at 25 yards, my bullets are going to be 2.3 inches below where I'm aiming at. You need to take note of that, because now you can go to an indoor range, aim at the center of the target, shoot, and instead of zeroing your groupings to the center of the target, what you can do is move the bullets and the group 2.3 inches below where you're aiming at. Once you attain that, then technically you have a 100-yard zero. All you would need to do is refine it and go outdoors. That's how you zero 100 yards at 25. And this could also work at 50 yards too. So let's say we have a 50-yard bay like what we have right here. So if I were to zero this optic right now, my bullet will be impacting 1.2 inches below where I'm aiming at. So that's the way to do it.
If you think all gun laws are an infringement and you live behind the enemy lines in the People's Republic of California, then check out our Unconvicted Felons t-shirt. We came out with this t-shirt design for you where most of us are fed up with the situation here in California. So check it out. Check out our website. Awesome t-shirt coming at you, and our new line of 2 arms where it stands for 2A Rights Matter. So check out our new t-shirt and help us feed our dog.